Okay, so thank you everybody for coming here. Um, Hope everybody's well. It's good to have these Zoom meetings. It seems to be the sort of the way now. I mean, I notice even His Holiness the Dalai Lama is giving more Zoom teachings than he ever gave in the temple. So he really likes it. He really enjoys it. He hasn't got far to go. He just goes from one room to another. And so it's been, this one blessing of the virus is that it has provided us with this kind of new way of communicating. Um, so what to do? I mean, I know that you often like to do prayers and before you start, but I'm not totally convinced that it's necessary to do prayers. I mean, prayers are great, if they are sort of lived as they're spoken and and the meaning is there, then it's great. But I think I mean, a prayer is actually just a means to set a particular state of mind anyway. So we might as well just skip the verbal bit and go straight to having a particular uh, state of mind. And I think uh, you know when you listen to anyone talk, or whether it's somebody in your friend, or if it's on TV, or you listen to some TED talks or some lectures, it's the way we listen is is important. I mean, I often catch myself listening with some preconceived idea of what I'm going to think of this person, which I think is not right. And what that does, of course, it closes the gate, it closes the door, and you interpret rather than listen. You just listen to what they say, you hear the words, but how they're going to be interpreted and understood is something that comes from your side, our side, rather than from the side of the person. And you're all familiar with the three pots, right? You should not listen like a upturned pot, a leaky pot, and a dirty pot. I mean, I think the leaky pot and is no problem these days because we've got YouTube, we got Google, nothing gets lost. I mean, so the leaky pot is to not forget what has been said, but um, quite honestly, I mean, that was in the days when, if you think about it, some great Lama gave a teaching, and that was it. If you didn't get it, if you missed something, you can't, there's no rewind, there was nothing, there was no recording anywhere. That was it. You had to listen, make sure you got it, and remember it. I mean, you couldn't remember everything, but the salient point, you had to do that. Plus, it didn't have microphones, right? I mean, some of those teachings given by the sort of the great masters, they said the 13th Dalai Lama had a voice that carried so clearly that you could hear him way back in the back row, which is handy, right? But otherwise, someone speaking not so clearly, maybe they've got a Comber accent or something, and you're in the back row. I mean, it's very tricky to catch everything, right? So how fortunate are we, to have the technology that enables us to, even the Dalai Lama, he teaches like at 3 o'clock in the morning in our time. I don't get up at that time, but I listen to it later on. I mean, how fortunate is that? So the leaky pot, not such a problem. The upturned pot, also, I don't think it's a problem for us because, I mean, I think, we're all quite sort of, diligent. We come to a teaching and we don't just sort of start thinking of something else or chatting to our neighbors. I mean, the upturned pot is that nothing can get in, right? I think, I've always thought, I mean, on the whole, Western Buddhists are quite diligent. I mean, and Tibetans, I've heard Tibetans say, you know, said when Westerners come to teaching, they have notes, they take notes, they sit and listen, while the Tibetans just sit and talk and gossip to each other. So I think most of the Westerners are quite good at that. But the first one, you know, there's a saying, you know, the sort of the pot that's dirty, that's sort of already preconceived of notions of what that person, how you're going to listen, what you're going to take from a person speaking. I think that is, you know, I think that's something that, especially if you're listening to politicians from a party you don't believe in, or from a religion that you don't follow, or from somebody you don't particularly like, there is a tendency to sort of pounce on anything that could be sort of construed as a fault or as a contradiction. I mean, when I say all these things, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me. This is what I do. I do this a lot. So, and of course, that the problem with that is, as I said before, you know, you just don't get. So, what does it mean to listen with an open mind? What does it mean? It doesn't mean to accept everything that person says without question. That's not having an open mind, is it? That's having a rather naive and sort of a overly innocent and overly accepting mind, that you accept what they say because you want to, because the person is somehow attractive in other ways, has got charisma, and so therefore you want to accept what they say. Or someone has told you this person is worth listening to, and so you accept it because you feel you want to belong to that group. None of those constitutes an open mind. They constitute a rather, if you like, rather like the example that the Tibetans gives of the child looking at the statues in the temple. They just stare and taking it all in, but they don't ask questions, they don't analyze. So that's not having an open mind. And also, you know, not having preconceived mind. So I think, you know, I always believe that you can have, people tell me not to be judgmental. Obviously I must be, and I wouldn't say it, but people tell me not to be judgmental. But I think, my personal feeling about this, just to digress a bit, is that I think it's okay to have opinions as long as you're willing to change them. I remember, of course, the famous story of Gyaltsen, when he first came to listen to Geshe Kappa. At that time, he was a Sakya monk, and he kind of he moved up and sat next to Tsongkhapa on the throne, and Tsongkhapa just moved along and accommodated him. And the message clearly from Gyaltsen was, well, you know, I'm as good as you are, or something, you know, you've got nothing to teach me. And that was his opinion. But then, because as Tsongkhapa spoke, he gradually became, he moved off and went and sat down, because he realized, and of course he became top disciple. So sometimes, you know, having an opinion is better, I think, than having this kind of open, accepting, unquestioning mind. Sometimes it's better to have an opinion, but not necessarily one that is fixed and will color your judgment. So, I mean, the best way to listen, of course, is to have no real opinions, but to listen, with, to listen in a kind of critical way. It's okay to be critical, isn't it? To be critical about something, but to give the person the benefit of the doubt, unless or until you can prove otherwise. I think it's so important these days, in this day of communication across the world. We listen to others, and and you see how people misinterpret and they write on Facebook or on Twitter something, and you think, well, that person didn't say that. That's not your reading, you know, and that's because they don't give the person a chance, you know, an impartial, non-partisan way. There's a, you know, Aryadeva in his 400 verses, he talks about, you know, intelligent and non-partisan. That's the way to listen. And sometimes this word in Tibetan is translated as open-minded. But I think it's more kind of, yeah, open-minded is okay. Open-minded. Anyway, so yeah, so I always think that, you know, when you listen to teaching, that's motivation. Then afterwards, you know, you can either sort of dismiss it or use it or whatever, you know. So I think, you know, I mean, that's good. And I always say I listen to this teaching for the sake of all sentient beings. I mean, yeah. I find if I say that, I don't really believe it. Sometimes I find I don't mean it, because I can't conceive of all sentient beings. You know, the best I can do sometimes, I feel, is that, well, I'll try and do something useful with it. You know, that isn't just for my own personal gain. Something like that is, I find, is. I mean, His Holiness always says, you know, we should be kaya laya, means like practical. Don't try and do things that's impossible. You know, he says, doesn't he? All sentient beings, it's easy to say, but maybe just to sort of be a benefit to those you know. He often talks about, you know, being helpful to those around you, people you're actually in contact with, including animals, your pets, you know, so like that. So this text is by Atisha. I don't need to tell you anything about Atisha because you all know, you know, that he left India in, I think it's 1042 or something, traveled to India, Tibet, on a 2-year journey, having been invited by the king, Chanchu, and you know, if you think about it, he was at that time either the abbot or the steward of, I think it's Vikramalashila, and these strange sort of wild people from the Himalayas sort of come down and say, please, you know, he was asked quite a few times, you know, I mean, you know, and apparently in Vikramalashila, there was a Tibetan Kamseng, there was a Tibetan section. There were so many Tibetans there that they had their special quarters where they sort of sat and, you know, made momo and drank Tibetan tea and stuff. There was this, that's what I heard. So obviously he must have known, you know, the Tibetans were devoted to bringing the Dharma, and that's what persuaded him, I'm sure, you know, that because he was 60 years of age, and even I mean, traveling from, you know, India to Tibet in those days, you can imagine how difficult it was. But he went, and he went to Purang, Tulung in West Tibet, in Ngari, for a few years, I think, and then he traveled with Nakul Tsawa around Tsang and central Tibet, and he even went to Samye, teaching and explaining, and he stayed there for 17 years until he died, which is quite something, really. I mean, and it's hard to obviously judge kind of person he was, but I always get the impression he was a very urbane, very sort of genteel, kind. I think Nakul Sawa or Tom Dumba maybe said, I never saw him say anything unpleasant. I never saw him get angry. I never saw him say anything that could be construed as unpleasant in all the 17 years. So, you know, he strikes me as that kind of person. And also, 11th century Tibet was kind of Buddhist, but I'm not sure how Buddhist it was. I mean, there was, obviously, it had declined a lot after Langdama and after the first sort of the first dissemination around the 8th century with the Guru Rinpoche and stuff. It had declined quite a bit, and people were saying that a lot of the Tantra was corrupt. And so I wonder what he thought of Tibetans when he met them. I think he saw a lot of devotion, but apparently there was not. He realized that there wasn't a lot of knowledge. They knew Tantra, they knew Sutra, but apparently he said they didn't know how to put them together. They didn't know how to put them together. So these are the kind of people he was dealing with. And I'm saying this because this will explain his texts, why he says the things he does in this text and in other texts, why he spoke the way he did. I think if he was in New York or something in present, he wouldn't say, he certainly wouldn't give this particular text. He certainly wouldn't say the things he said. I mean, he was influenced by what he saw in the Tibetan character. I think that's important. We often have these kind of cross-cultural problems with translations and texts because a lot of them don't seem to fit anymore into the Western world, and so we've got to pick out what is pertinent, and also to try and understand why people said. I mean, even these days, the Dalai Lama, he says if Tsongkhapa was here now, he wouldn't teach Lamrim Chemo like he taught it. He would probably start with dependent origination or emptiness rather than Guru devotion. And there are reasons why he started with Guru devotion. Some of it's got to do with Atisha. Atisha starts with Guru devotion, and he stresses it to the Tibetans. So there are reasons. This is very important. I think it's important anyway, because in translation, I have these sort of translation discussions with the Sadra Foundation people, Woolston and Woolston Fletcher and Heidi and these people, and we talk. This is the kind of thing we talk about, that, and of course there is a lot to be said. One of the biggest issues in translations these days is, should we update the text to sort of suit modern attitudes, especially when it comes to gender inequality that is found in the Tibetan text very clearly. Should we change he to she or something? There's a big issue with translations. And so when Atisha taught this in the 11th century, then he was talking to Tibetans who were devoted people, full of faith, longing, yearning to know, thirsty for knowledge, but not particularly sort of not quite clear about what path they should be on. That's the milieu in which he taught. So I think it's important to know. This text is called the Bodhisattva. I'm using. Have you all got the text with you? Yeah. Which translation are we using? Are we using the Rigpa one? I have translated this text, but I couldn't find it. So with Snehi, yes?
Yeah, we're using the one from Lotsawa House. I posted the link in the chat, and it's.
Oh, Lotsawa House. Okay. Is it by Rigpa Translations?
Yes. Yes, huh? It is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Yes. Okay. There are quite a few translations of this text. Thupten Jimba did one. Yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the Tibetan. I've got the Tibetan text here. I'm going to go through the Tibetan. I'm not going to, and I'm going to translate it as I go, and then we'll match it in, because, everyone has different ways of translating. But I will use this. This Rigpa translation. But I'm going to go straight from the Tibetan and translate it that way. So the text. The Garland of Jewels of the Bodhisattva, or Bodhisattva's Garland of Jewels. Jimba says that, what does this title mean? There's two ways of looking at this. One is that the Garland of Jewels refers to the Garland of Jewels of the Bodhisattva. The jewels refers to the qualities of the Bodhisattva, and the jewels are the qualities of the Bodhisattva that are spoken one after another to form a garland. That's one way. But the other way is that these are this is actually an actual jeweled garland, which is garland which was put around the neck of I'm never quite sure how Tibetans understand the word garland, because the Indian garland is usually refers to these flowers that they put around but the Tibetan word trengwa also means mala, in Tibetan. It is actually refers to something that is strung together, whether it's flowers or jewels or bodhi seeds or whatever. But that's what a garland is. It's one after another, and the text is written. It's one like this. And I think there are quite a few. I didn't count them, but it might be 108. I don't know. But and these are the jewels, and they form a garland. They are a garland in the sense of if you were to adorn yourself with these jewels of practice, then you would be suitably ornamented as a bodhisattva. I always think the word garland is a lot in text, isn't it? Precious Garland by Nagarjuna. The word garland is a lot. So it's a very big thing in India. I think it refers to those flowers they put around. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, when you put flowers around someone's neck, you are honoring them in some way by, it's rather like sort of when you win a gold medal or something, you put it around, so that's the idea of a garland, I think. Anyway, so yes, so although the text has got the Sanskrit, I don't think it was written in Sanskrit. I don't know whether it was translated by Naklotsawa or whether Atisha spoke it in Tibetan. I have no idea, but it does exist. It can be found in the Tengur because he was Indian, and therefore all Indian commentaries were found. It is in the Tengur, and so it has a Sanskrit title. But I suspect that it was written in Tibetan, but I'm not sure. Okay, so I don't know. Let's begin. Homage to great compassion. He follows, Chandrakirti in his entrance into middle way. Majjhimagavatara. He pays homage to compassion, and he says, compassion is a seed, produces the sprout of bodhisattva and bodhicitta. And he quotes this sutra where the Buddha explains why compassion should be prostrated to. He said it's like the moon. He said people salute the new moon because the new moon is the cause of the full moon, and so it is the seed. Compassion is like the seed, the cause. Without compassion, there is no bodhicitta. Without bodhicitta, there's no bodhisattva. Without bodhisattva, there is no Buddha. So Chandrakirti says, compassion is it's so true, isn't it? I mean, the Dalai Lama says just because you have a Mahayana teacher doesn't make you a Mahayana practitioner. He said once to I think he said it to Piero, actually. He said there are there are a lot of Mahayana practitioners in Thailand and a lot of Hinayana practitioners in Tibet. So, it depends on, compassion, whether or not you are a Mahayanist or a Bodhisattva. So that's why Atisha, I think, is making homage to compassion. Homage to the deities who inspire faith and devotion. I've never understood that line. In Tibetan, Devala, I mean, it means that, I think it means the deities that you have, I mean, surely all deities inspire faith and devotion, don't they? Devala means like, the deities of faith, literally. I think it possibly means to the deities that you have great faith in. And homage to the Lama, and to the Lama. Masters is Lama. So the first line in Tibetan, it says, wonderful line, Tesum Tamsha Pangja Shing. Tesum Tamsha Pangja. It means abandon all doubts. Here's be done with doubt and indecision. There is no doubt. There's no two words. It's just one word. Tetsum. Tetsum means doubt, and pang means to get rid of. It's the first line of this text. I think it's an extraordinary thing to say to somebody. Imagine, and I think this relates to what I was saying earlier. What did Atisha see in the Tibetans? He saw devotion. So therefore, he said, okay, you do, abandon all doubts, practice. And the next line is embrace your practice, cherish practice. That is quite something to say, isn't it? Because certainly, I don't think it would go down very well in our time for someone to come to a Buddhist to come to the West. The first thing he says, abandon all doubts. And our reactions were, why? Why should we? Why should we? I can't just abandon doubts. I can't just get rid of them. They won't just disappear on their own. Doubts are doubts. And so I think he's saying this in the sense that, for Tibetans, that's what you should do. But for us, I don't think it works, quite honestly, for skeptical, analytically minded Westerners. I mean, I don't mean, I'm sure you, of course, and us, we are supposedly, well into the Buddhism by now, that we shouldn't have any major doubts. But generally speaking, I think it's a really important point here about doubt, because the thing that I find myself asking is, well, are all doubts bad? I mean, and should we, can we differentiate between doubts? Some doubts are necessary and some are not necessary. And how do we abandon them anyway? And what kind of doubts are we talking about here? Now, in Tibetan, doubt is defined as yini, which means two minds this way. And I think that is fairly consistent with how we understand doubt. If we doubt about somebody, we're usually not quite sure whether we can trust them or believe in them. We say, well, I don't know, it could be this, they could be okay. On the other hand, so there is this dual sort of these two types of conceptions, two-minded. So, and of course, the effect of doubt is that it stops you. I mean, the doubts stop you. They stop you from doing something. You can't fully engage. I mean, one of the definitions in logic of doubt is that it stops you from engaging. You can't engage with whatever it is you doubt about because you're not convinced. So there is that, that problem. So that doubt, and even in, in Buddhism, where so much is taken on faith and belief. I mean, not in the same way as blind faith, but in the sense of being asked to accept phenomena that we cannot see, we cannot experience, we cannot have any contact with. Past life, future life, omniscient deities, Buddhas, miraculous events, the idea of karma, that somehow or other some previous action can somehow still ripen in this life and cause, suffering and happiness. What I do now going to be the cause of something. These things are not evident. So at the beginning, I suspect that we're going to have doubt. And I don't see why we shouldn't have doubt, quite honestly. I think there's nothing wrong with having a doubt or two. The question is, how do we get rid of them? How do we get rid of them? How do we resolve a doubt? Now, if you go into the Dharma, like I said before, on the basis of you are inspired by a charismatic teacher, it's something you want to do. You feel it's something you should be doing. And you go into that and you follow, and all you see friends around you who have done the same thing, and you go in. You're really floating in the air. There's not much under your feet. And when something happens, something comes along, someone says, someone says something negative, or you hear some negative story about somebody, and then sort of doubts, well, hang on, I thought someone once said to me, I thought all these lamas were enlightened. How can this happen? This is doubt. This has to be resolved, and it has to be resolved, because otherwise, how can you proceed? I mean, the Dalai Lama says, there's a phrase, Shene Deba, which means faith through knowledge. Share means to know, Deba means faith. Shene Deba, faith through knowledge. He said, this is the kind of faith we need. No, you've got to know. Yeah. But how do you know? How do you know? How is it possible to know about these things? And of course, in the there are two ways of knowing. In Tibetan Buddhist epistemology recognizes two ways of knowing: direct experience and inference. Those are the two ways. There is no third way. You either know something through your senses, or if you're an enlightened being, you know it through your mental consciousness. You know it directly, in so much as there is nothing between the consciousness and the object of consciousness. There is no intervening concept, no intervening conceptuality. There is a knowledge. Not only that, there is the knowledge that it knows it to be valid. It's not, for example, if you put on a pair of blue glasses and everything looks blue, that blue is a direct perception, right? But you don't believe in it, do you? Why not? Because it's contradicted by another perception. You know that as soon as you take your glasses off, everything is, snow is white, and everyone else sees it as white. So like when you see the moon in the water, reflected in the water, that famous story of the silly wolf or whoever it was who saw the moon reflected in the water. We see the moon in the water. It's a direct experience. It's beautiful. People write poetry about it. It's wonderful. But we don't believe in it for a minute. Because, that's a reflection. The moon's not really in the water. But it is a direct experience. But our intelligence, our prior knowledge, our memory tells us that it is not trustworthy. So direct experience is fine, as long as you know that it is not a illusion or a hallucination, like the moon in the water, it is not that. I remember when I was Dharamsala, I got pneumonia. I woke up in the morning and I was so ill, and weight on my chest. And the first thing I noticed was, I thought, gosh, it's windy. You know, how is it so windy? Where did that come from? Of course, I was hallucinating, delirium. But for a brief second, I believed in it. You know, I believed in it until I realized that. You know, so the direct perception is very good as long as you know. But direct perception is no good for understanding past and future lives or law of karma. It's no good at all. No, you can't remember, or well, some people can. We can't remember, or we can't see past lives. You know, we can't see omniscient Buddhas, millions of them. We can't see a million, billions of Buddhas on the tip of a needle, as it says in the Samantabhadra prayer. We can't see those things, and yet we read about them. So it seems to me that the real way of knowing, as Dharmakirti pointed out, and why Dharmakirti's works are so important, is that we must analyze and penetrate these impenetrable, sort of unknown, hidden phenomena until we gain conviction one way or another that this is so and that is so. That is the way to get rid of doubt, I think. I think. And people will say to me, oh, you believe in past and future lives? I say, yeah. And they say, well, prove it to me. Prove it to me and I'll accept it. I say, well, I can't prove it to you by stating some syllogism, some logical syllogism that says there is past life because that's impossible. That won't do anything. It takes years of contemplating, especially the nature of mind and the nature of the mind, how it is separate from physicality, how it has a stream, how it moves, how it's dependent upon physical base, but not one with the physical base and not created by the physical body. That kind only is the only way of overcoming the kind of, well, I mean, even now, sometimes I think, maybe, and I often wonder, I know people who, many people who have died and passed away. They're not Buddhists or anything. And they passed away very peacefully, very peacefully. I had a friend, a really dear friend. We go way, way back. And he was dying cancer. And I went to see him. He was all alone in his little flat. And he said, oh, I'm happy to go. I've had enough, And while I was there, he drifted into some kind of sleep. Then he woke up and says, oh, damn, I thought I'd gone there. And I think, Christ, he doesn't care. I don't think he'll be freaking out by now. He was happy. And I suppose, and if you have a belief that there's nothing there after, then okay. If you're suffering with dreadful illness and you're old, okay, why not? Let's just let it go. I've had enough of this life. I've had a good life. Bye-bye. And then people think that. And but of course, we Buddhists, we're not allowed to. we're not allowed to think like that. Oh no, we've got to think of the bardo. We've got to think of what's going to come there. And oh no. So, but it would be nice, wouldn't it, if there was no bardo? And if as someone, I think Gonzo Rinpoche said to me, he said, if there was no past and future life, I'd give up Buddhism now. What's the point? I mean, you'd have to worry about future lives. So we have to know. It's important to know. Yes, there is, because it's tempting to not. So these things, doubts have to be resolved. Not all doubts are bad. There's a wonderful Tibetan saying. It says, if you have no doubts, you're either stupid or you're a Buddha. Right? So we're not Buddhas, right? So if you have no doubts, although Atisha is saying abandon all doubts, it's a different message that he's saying to the Tibetans. The Tibetans already had devotion, But for us, and for many Westerners, if we're going to go out and teach Dharma, we can't just say, believe in this, believe in that. We can't say that. And some doubt is good. It's good to doubt. I mean, it's good to doubt in the sense of being skeptical. You've got to check up on your Lama for up to 12 years. It's why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? I mean, I still feel there's a tendency amongst Westerners to, I don't know, believe too readily, too easily. It's not a sin to doubt. It's not a sin to say, well, hang on a minute. What about this? Not in a kind of close-minded way, like that, sort of like the dirty pot. Not like that, with an open mind. But why not check out everything? I think it's very important to have these doubts and to somehow deal with them that way. And the Dalai Lama says, you don't have to believe what I say. You can question me, because everybody does. He's the Dalai Lama. We believe him. And it's a bit different, because obviously he has qualities that shine through, that override any doubts. But that's one way of getting rid of, there's another way of getting rid of doubts. And I think it's this. It's probably not worth, some doubts are not worth having, because the opposite, the belief, is so much more beneficial. And I know that sounds a bit of a cop-out, but if you think of sometimes the alternative to doubt, to the belief, the trust, and you try and imagine what that would be like, and the kind of joy and sort of wonderful sort of experience that would bring, as opposed to sort of, man, I don't know, like the king who was shot by an arrow, and the minister tried to put out the arrow. No, don't put it. I want who shot it, and why did they shoot it, and da da da. Of course, he died before they got the arrow out. So, and I think sometimes some doubts, especially if they're not important doubts, are not worth having. And so the next question is, well, how can you choose not to have a doubt? How can you do that? Well, I think you can in Buddhism, because Buddhism teaches dependent origination, dependent arising, in the nature of the mind, and how things arise through the force of circumstance and condition, and not findable when you search for them. They're not there, like the mirage is not the water. And I think on that basis, we do have a choice, that we don't have to. Sometimes we say, well, I have this doubt, but I choose not to have it because the alternative is so much better. And, Aryadeva says, if you have any doubts, meditate on emptiness. Now, I'm quite sure what he means by that, but I think he means emptiness, understanding sort of dependent arising, which is emptiness. To understand dependent arising is the ultimate truth of all. It is the truth of phenomena. That is what phenomena are all about. There is no other. There's no further truth than that. So if you know that, if you have some idea, some inkling of that, right, then any other truth, is it that, is it this, is it that, somehow lesser. And you can choose. I think, I may be sort of barking up the wrong tree here, but I think you can somehow choose. I mean, and they say, don't they, is it, if you understand the four truths and the two truths, then other doubts as to little things like, does Yamantaka really hold a hammer in this hand, or is it in that hand? These things don't matter anymore. They don't matter. Some people say, well, why should we believe in Buddhism? This is the religion that believed the world was flat. That has a big mountain in the middle called which is disproved. Even the Dalai Lama no longer accepts. How can we accept? You know, well, we can, because these things aren't that important. You know, as the Dalai Lama said, he says the Buddha didn't come to draw maps. He didn't come. He wasn't a cartographer. Is that what a map person is? I think anyway. And so, you know, I don't know if it's important to you, but to me, the whole idea of doubts is such an important topic. And if you talk to people and you want to, and people say, well, why are you a Buddhist? And you explain something and you think, well, I explained that really well. And they look at you and they say, well, I don't accept that. I mean, how can you know, their level of doubt, you know, we haven't been able to penetrate, can't penetrate, you know. So I think doubt's important. So but I think Atisha is saying, he's not asking Tibetans to do this, to go away and meditate on the nature of mind, or he sees that they are devoted. And he's just saying, you know, because interesting how Jimba translates this sentence. He translates it as abandon all lingering doubts. The word lingering is not in the Tibetan, but he translates lingering, because I think already the Tibetans they have devotion, but there may be one or two lingering doubts. So Atisha is saying, get rid of them. Now let's go. Let's start the path. Get rid of your doubts. Off we go. So I think it's a bit like that. We're taking an hour on one word. That's not bad, is it? At this rate, we're going to. So that, I think that's what he's saying, and I really I think such an important line. And in the next line, he says, cherish, embrace your practice with all your heart. Yes, it says Drupa is practice. Nenten is with strong intensity. And the word chiapa means to cherish, to value. The word here is the same word as in self-cherishing. It's, you know, you cherish yourself or you cherish others. It's the same word, chiapa. Value, cherish, see it as really important. So he's saying that. And again, I think it's the same message that he's giving to Tibetans. You know, cherish your practice. That's most important. You know. So then it says, shake off lethargy, dullness, and laziness. Yeah, this line is for me, definitely. Tibetan has ni, sleep. That's sleep. Muk, which means sort of, you know, that sort of 3 o'clock in that post-lunch sort of, you know, sleepiness, that dull lethargy. How's he translated here? Dullness. I think Jimpa translated as lethargy, but you know, the mukpa, strangely enough, the Tibetan word mukpa is the same word for the ignorance in the 12 links. There's in the middle, there's the pig, right? And the pig is called timuk, which means ignorance. And it's the same word, you know, it's kind of like, you know, sort of sleepy, can't be bothered with them. And lelo, of course, is emptiness, laziness. And interesting, you all know that laziness in Tibetan, in Buddhist terms, doesn't mean not being busy or not doing it. It means being overly attracted to worldly preoccupations. That's one type of, it's type of laziness. In other words, you know, you can't be bothered to practice, so you carry on in the same old way, chasing the same old dreams. That's a kind of laziness. So ni mu lelo, you know. So interesting, abandon sleep. I don't think I could abandon sleep, quite honestly. I mean, I don't get enough. Even the Dalai Lama says sleep is the best meditation. So obviously he's saying, you know, yeah, get up early. Don't lie in bed till 11 o'clock or something. Sleep, yeah. Yeah, sleep. Unless you're doing sleep yoga, of course, which I'm sure you all are. I'm not, but you know, some of you might be doing sleep yoga. And you know, yeah, laziness. I mean, laziness, I mean, is you know, it's one of the 51 secondary minds, and it's the opposite to effort, you know, effort. And laziness, there are different types of lazinesses. Procrastination is laziness where you tomorrow, you know. Then there's a kind of laziness that thinks, oh, I can't, you know, I can't do it, it's too difficult, something like that, you know. So yeah. Then all strive always with enthusiasm and joy. The word joy is not in the Tibetan, it's enthusiasm or effort, but everyone seems to translate this word tsundru as enthusiasm or joy. This is because Shantideva defined, the word just means effort. Do work hard, strive. You know, if you're trying to if you're trying to learn how to play the piano, or you're trying to sort of dig the garden or whatever it is, you need effort. Without effort or perseverance, it's not going to happen. That's what the word actually means. Sometimes I think we, you know, translators, they put the word joy in to make it sound a bit more attractive. But that's because Shantideva defined effort as taking joy in doing good, taking joy, that you're happy to do it, you know, not like asking your teenage son to do the washing up, not that kind of doing it sort of begrudgingly, not that, you know. So that's how it, but actually there is no word for joy, but it constantly, you know, maintain your effort. That's what the Tibetan says. Strive always, enthusiasm and joy. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, I still, as again, I think it's, you know, we need to understand these things, because there are some Westerners, I mean, and probably some Tibetans too, who work almost like sort of with a whip on their back, you know, and kind of a hair shirt mentality. I've got to do that. I've got, you know, I've seen it, you know, and I think I had a bit myself way back when, where you almost want to sort of beat yourself up if you haven't, if you're not practicing 24 hours a day. That's why the word joy is there. to you know, again, you know, what's the point? What's the point? I remember Geshe Rapton, he used to live on the up above McLeod behind between Rishi Bhavan and Tushita, and in a little hut. And of course it was the path for people to go up to the mountains. And he said to me, you know, regularly I see these Westerners walking by. And I said, where are you going? And he said, oh, I'm going up to a cave to meditate, you know, with great enthusiasm and sort of perseverance. He said, then a week or so later, they come back down again, you know. So in Tibetan, there's a word called hairy renunciation, you know, renunciation with hair. I think what that means is that if you truly renounced, you know, you become a monk, a nun, you shave your head. You can't have both. You can't renounce. I mean, of course, you can renounce with hair. That's not the point. The example is that you know, there's some kind of renunciation. It's really genuine. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. You know, I'm going to go and meditate, and we get enthused by it. And that is a kind of enthusiasm, but it's called in Tibetan. It's called a forced enthusiasm. Forced. They say when you take monastic vows, you know, you shouldn't do them with this kind of that kind of, oh, I won't, I'll do it. Not like that. You should take the vows from understanding the purpose of vows, what they do, not feeling that you've got, oh, I'm going to do it, come what may. I'm going to do this kind of a, I don't know, sort of, I was going to say Christian guilt, but there's something where we seem to sort of want to force ourselves. Got to do it. I've got to do it, you know. I always remember I did my first Goenka course. God, it was painful. I was in so much pain in my legs, In fact, before that, I think I did a course in Bodh Gaya with Munindra. Many of you may know Munindra. Was it Munindra? Yeah, I think it was Munindra. And it was so painful. And I remember thinking, well, I've got to go through this pain. I've got to, work through it, force myself to get through it. But I didn't. I gave up. I just couldn't do it. So, I mean, he's saying all Tatu Sundar Bebaja, constantly or always strive. The word strive is the word. The Tibetan just says strive always. Enthusiasm is extra translation. So, but we need to know what it means. As we get older, we kind of mellow out, don't we? We're not as enthusiastic, or we don't, or maybe we are. I don't know. That's the kind of thing. So then, this next line says, mindful, vigilant, and careful. Okay, these three always go together in Tibetan. It's important to know what they mean. This word mindful or mindfulness in Tibetan also means memory, and it's the four close contemplations. What is that? What's the Sanskrit? Smriti, was it? Satipatthana. So this word Dhamma in Tibetan means to remember, but it also means to be mindful. But it means being mindful in the sense of not forgetting what you're concentrating on. It is very much used in the development of shamatha, the mental quiescence. It's one of the mental factors that is important, and it has the sense of not forgetting, which mindful does. If you think about, be mindful of what be mindful of the fact that it means not forgetting. But the word mindfulness has become now a synonym for just having some kind of observational approach to everything. That's fine, but it's not what it means here. No, and it means if you are focused on an object or on a particular state of mind, whether it's compassion or love or a kind of sort of attitude of renunciation, whatever it is, your mindfulness makes sure you don't forget it. You don't wander off. And Shantideva, of course, talks about it a lot, And if you do wander off, then suddenly you find, and suddenly you remember, I shouldn't be, I've forgotten. That is the second one, which is translated here as vigilant. It's not really vigilant, it's more like awareness. The word in Tibetan is share, shimba. Share means to know. You know now that you are, I'm starting to get a little bit angry now. It's time to walk away, Gavin. Move. That's sheshin. That's knowing, right? As long as you're always maintaining patience, this person is trying to wind you up, but you're maintaining your patience. That is mindfulness. You're mindful. You know what you're doing. You're not forgetting. That's what I should be doing. If you do, then another part of your mind, this awareness is described as being a spy in the mind. So, no, stop. Yeah. These two together. Jason Kappa in his Lamram Chamo, he talks about these two, and he introduces another one, concentration, mindfulness, and awareness. These three are mental factors. The word concentration is tingazin or samadhi, but it doesn't mean some advanced sort of ability to concentrate on for aeons. Not that, that's advanced. It just means the simple ability of concentration. And he talks about these three. And he says, he said, so the holding, the ability to hold the mind with great depth onto a particular object, that's concentration. So, you know, you're able to sort of hold. We all have concentration, maybe not very long, maybe for a few seconds, but we all have the ability to concentrate on something. It could be an object, it could be a practice, it could be something, whatever it is, concentration. That is concentration. Then he says, not wandering off from that, that's mindfulness. The basic, the root object, not wandering off from that, that is, that's mindfulness. Then he says, if your mind does wander off, you immediately know that you've wandered and you bring it back. That's awareness or vigilance. So these are three, I mean, these three you can practice anywhere. You know, you're sitting in an airport, anything, whatever you're doing, these three together. I mean, and this in this text, this Gomde, Gomde, I don't know if you know Gomde is Geshe in Canada, I think. He says, you know, there's very, you know, concentration and mindfulness are very similar. They're very, very similar. So I stress this because, you know, mindfulness is taken on this new meaning, you know, that it just means to observe, but it doesn't mean that. It has this idea. It's not always rooted in the past, but it has a connection to the past. Insofar as that, you know, you keep your mind on something which is good, which is virtuous. There's a kind of a memory thing there because you've learned, you know that this is the right thing to do. I'm not going to get angry. I'm going to maintain some patience here. It's connected to the past. That's mindfulness. And the moment you wander off, or the moment you're doing your puja, and halfway through you're thinking about what's on Netflix or something, then you bring him. That's awareness. So he talks about these three. And the third one, what's the translation? Careful. Well, yeah, careful in Tibetan is bayu. Careful really, Jimpa translates it as conscientious. And that may be slightly better, conscientious. It means, and it's defined, again, it's defined as someone who is constantly practicing, you know, practicing, always conscientious in whatever, the tiniest little thing. You know, this is called, you can understand by understanding the opposite, which is bagme. Bagme is often described as like when you've had too much to drink. You know, when you have too much to drink, oh, you don't care, oh, it doesn't matter, come on, you only live once, you know, that kind of attitude, that's the opposite. Now, if you have the first two, the chances are you'll have the third, because the third one is not a separate kind of, it's naturally there. You're conscientious. If you're a conscientious person, means that you always making sure, you know, the Dalai Lama is someone very conscientious. You know, he keeps his vows as clear, pure as he possibly can. You know, he's always make sure everything. He's a person of great routine. You know, he does every morning. He goes through the same, and he makes sure everything. There's this sort of conscience. Geshe Rabdana, I think, described it as if you had. It's like walking on a tightrope. You know, you got to make sure you don't fall off. You're constantly, you know, aware like that. And or someone described it. Oh yeah, if you've got a wound on your arm, open wound, and you're moving in a crowd, you know, you're really aware. You know, that's conscientious. You know, It could be also mindfulness, couldn't it? Anyway, these three, or these four really, concentration, mindfulness, awareness, conscientiousness, these four are states of mind. I mean, Shantideva talks a lot, devotes a whole chapter to, that we can practice. It's not just for Tibetans, something for us we can practice at any time. And yeah, very important that. One book on it, and protect, guard the doorways. Actually, the first line should connect with the second. So with or by being mindful, vigilant, by that you guard the doorways. That's what the word guard is good. I mean, these three, they're like guards. Guards the doorways of the senses. Doorways of the senses. One book. Oh yeah, I see. Okay, yes. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Yes, the five senses. Yeah. You guard. What does that mean to guard? What does that mean? Shantideva says when you walk along a road, you should always keep your eyes on the road. You shouldn't go none of that. You should keep your eyes on the road, straight ahead, like that. And you watch some monks, especially down in the other Thailand and Sri Lanka and so forth, they walk, focused. And in many ways, that's what the Goenka meditation of that mind where you walk slowly, so you keep your eyes from, because if you see something, that sparks of a thought, and then off you go. So yeah. Then it says 3 times day and night, examine your thoughts. Yeah, again, it's very clear. It says thoughts, it says actually, Tibetan says the continuum of the mind, the mental continuum. What state of mind am I in now? How, same thing in 8 verses of the training of the mind, isn't it? It says the same things. I will always check my mind, and if there's the slightest mental affliction anywhere, I'll kick it out. So this refers to the sort of, sometimes you're doing something and you're not really paying attention to what's going on in your mind, and you find yourself sort of, you could drift off into thinking this, that, all kinds of thoughts. So it always maintain. I mean, Atisha said, what did he say? He said he took his vows every night. He said, I break my tantric vows regularly, even bodhisattva vows, but never the monk vows, never the pratimoksha vows. But the other 2 I break, So every night he would retake them, So it's that kind of when you go to bed. Yeah. That kind of shit. Examine your thoughts. Yes. Then it says, Shinki Yunda Tapaja. No, it doesn't make that. Again, proclaim your own faults. It's Tibetan. Proclaim your own, talk about your own faults. Proclaim them. The word is drakpa. Drakpa means drakpa is the same word to advertise, or when someone, a town crier announces with a megaphone, that's this word. It doesn't just mean tell 1 or 2 people. I mean, maybe you should go on Facebook. I've done this. I'm a sinner. It means don't hold back. It's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes we're very good at proclaiming our own faults, but we don't like it when other people do. When other people do it, then we don't like that so much. But we're very good. It's almost like we have the authority, the right to talk about my faults, because they're my faults. But don't you dare talk about them. Me, my family, my country, right or wrong. We don't like talking about our faults. We don't like talking about the faults of our family, our country, or our religion, or anything. So it's not just self. I think it's of anything that's connected to me. We should be open, not too much. Otherwise, it becomes embarrassing. People are always talking about how bad they are all the time. It's just too much, and it's false. And it's almost like a kind of way of gathering some kind of sympathy and you want to be seen as a humble person. so you talk about your faults, but the motivation is a bit dodgy, because you want people to sort of think how humble and how honest you are. So you tell them, I'm not a good person. I see it on TV a lot when there's celebrities, or they're good at things, but they'll never say they are. They'll, oh well, no. But I always suspect they don't mean it. Because if you are good at something, why not say it? What's wrong? And as long as you're not, but even the Dalai Lama, he says, what did he say? He says, I'm not the best Dalai Lama, but I'm not the worst. He said that once. And I don't see anything wrong with sometimes if you have proclaiming your qualities, as long as it's, it depends why you're doing it. I mean, in this book that I'm translating now, which is the teachings of the Dalai Lama, he talks about the positive I and the negative I. And he said, there's a positive sense of self, which is good. And he said, in today's world, there's a lot of competition, trying to be the best. He said, if you have good motivation, perfectly okay to compete, perfectly okay to put yourself up there, perfectly all right, as long as it's done, for good reasons. You want to, whatever your good reasons might be. You want to help others, or you want to help your company, or whatever. So the other extreme where you say, oh, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, that's an extreme. However, this instruction is to not hide your faults, but to not pretend that you are better than you are. So one of the things I notice sometimes, people talk to me and they'll say a word, and I realize I don't know what that word means. So there's a little bit in me and says, well, should I ask what that word means? If I asked it, it would look like I'm really ignorant. I don't know what, I'm a translator, I should know what words mean. So things like that, I think if you don't know, I don't know. So where are we? Oh yeah. Don't look for fault. Okay. And we've only got 5 minutes anyway. What does it say? Yeah. Don't look for faults in others. Oh yeah. Don't search for, don't look for. And tupa means their errors, their faults. If you don't like Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, you will always search for look for things that it's not too difficult sometimes, is it? To find sometimes. But again, if you're in debate and you're discussing, someone expresses an opinion and you think, no, that's perfectly okay to argue, to discuss. You're not arguing with the person, you're arguing with their opinion. It's perfectly okay to, sometimes it gets you into trouble. It gets me into trouble a lot, because, you're not, if you say you're being judgmental and you can't say this, you can't say that, you've got to agree with everybody, and you're disrespecting them if you disagree with them. So, but I think it's perfectly okay sometimes, but this is about trying in order to sort of boost your own sort of status, you pick out sort of faults, which may well be there, and you kind of announce them. I mean, you only need to go on Twitter to see examples of this. I mean, goodness me. I don't know how people survive on Twitter. Anyway, but I don't, you know, it's very tempting, isn't it? It's very tempting sometimes to pick out faults, especially if you don't like that person or you feel they've done something wrong to you. So you pick on, you say, oh yeah, it's a good person, but you know, a bit like this, doesn't quite know how to do. So I've listened to His Holiness many times. I've never, ever heard him find fault with other people. Never. Even Donald Trump, he didn't, I mean, he talked about his hair. Oh no, he did say putting America first is not right. But that's disagreeing with a political philosophy. You know, his point, I don't think that's different. Anyway, so don't find faults in others, but sometimes for the sake of argument, if argument forwards or if argument informs, then I don't see why, you know, we can't disagree with one another and point out things, not personality about their persons, but you say, well, I just don't agree with that. I often don't agree with my editor who says, Gavin, you can't say this. And I say, well, why not? Oh, because it will be misunderstood, it'll offend people and da da da. You know, so we discuss and things like that, but yeah, it's very difficult not to find fault with other people. I don't bet you drive. Sometimes then people sort of cut you up and you're driving along and then they do something really stupid. And once or twice I found myself sort of, oh, what's that, you know? But, you know, I don't know what that person's been through that day. And I don't know what they're going through. And maybe they were distracted. And once or twice someone's turned to me and said, I'm sorry, because I feel so bad. So I made a decision that I'm going to always be polite when I'm driving from now on. And that's my New Year resolution. A bit late, but there you go. You know. So easy to find fault. Yeah, proclaim your own votes. Yeah, and we'll just do this last two lines. Then make know the good points of others. Hide your own faults. Yes. The Tibetan's the other way around here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Publicize, the faults of others. The verb to make known is the same verb as in the first one, make plain. But make plain your own failings. There's the same verb in Tibetan. So you talk about the good points of others. You talk about them, and but you keep quiet about your own. You keep quiet about your own. Yeah, I remember once I was at a translating conference in Bir, and these lamas came up from the Kaji Nyingma tradition. I think they were. They spent the first 15 minutes telling us why they were the wrong people to be here, because they were useless. They didn't know anything about translation. Their English was awful, and they have no idea why they're here. I mean, can you imagine sort of someone standing up in a conference in the West and spending the first 10 minutes saying how useless they are, but they're going to talk? I mean, it's just not done. It would be seen as something, we have to be assertive and we have to put forward ourselves. So, as I said, sometimes it's okay. But if it's done with this idea of sort of raising, you want people to think good of you, no, it's no good. His Holiness often says, he says, people tell me I look only 80, I look 70, I got the face of a 70-year-old, although I'm 85. He said, this is because, I meditate on love and compassion every day. So is that boasting? Is he boasting? Is he talking? No, I don't think so. I think he's way beyond that. But he says, he says these things. Sometimes it's okay to say them. Depends on your motivation. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Okay. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin.